I wasn't complaining. I was just uncomfortable.
This thing, you can
That
you can stop
people
the
had
pause if you
people
like.
still hold up.
And it's gonna put it again immediately.
So it's running now?
And the sound is like that.
Thank you.
The quality.
Thank you very much.
Then you put everything on flash.
Staying in my
Bring it to us and we'll
Oh, it doesn't go into the system
No, this
automatically
one,
like the other one?
no, this one is not
I
done.
have to copy and.
This one is actually local. It's got its
Okay,
notification.
okay, all right, thank you.
Okay. What time? It's 4.
Excuse me?
What time is the clock gonna go?
This class is over at 2:50, but then I have 3 to 4.
Oh,
Three
in
to
this
four.
room also, right?
Yeah,
Okay. So then we'll start.
afterwards now. Okay. All right, thank you. All right, so refreshing your memory, right? We're almost done with this God topic today and tomorrow. Right? We had arguments for and against God's existence, like the argument from evil is against God's existence. Aquinas' first cause argument, and Anselm's the concept of God implies his existence argument, and we had a number of arguments like that. Adams, God does not have to create the best, the goldfish and the puppies and all that, right? So that was one whole load, straightforward arguments. That's traditional philosophical approach. But then, complicating matters was William James, who talks about the will to believe. Maybe that actually, I should call it willingness. Right? James suggests that if you don't have a willingness to believe, there might be a whole world of evidence that you'll never see. Right? If you don't open your mind to the possibility of it. Right? So he's saying maybe that Hume's attitude is wrong. Hume says, for something to count as evidence for God, it has to be something that we should automatically reject. It has to be something that's physically impossible. Otherwise, it wouldn't count as evidence, like a miracle is evidence for God. Right? So James is suggesting that Hume's attitude is wrong. Right? That maybe there is evidence, and that we shouldn't reject it a priori, meaning on the grounds of reason alone without looking at it. And that really the person who does that is the one who's not sensitive to the evidence. The scientist weather vane is not working, according to William James. If there's evidence out there, and you're closed-minded and you don't see it, shame on you, not on the believer, right? So then we looked at a sample, Yogananda, of somebody who's got a willingness and then had their own personal experience, what he says, of God, right? But it's a kind of unusual conception of God for somebody who's not a Hindu, right? Hindus are familiar with this kind of concept of God as in everything, and that the whole universe is God's mind, and that in all of us and in everything is God, and if you just scratch the surface away, you find God. And you actually experience God's infinite mind, right? Yogananda thinks that he had that experience. He describes it, all right? It would certainly count as evidence maybe to you if you had that experience, right? So then we talked about me. Yesterday we talked about some of my experiences, but these weren't directly of God, but let's just say my spiritual / supernatural experiences. This is kind of a little bit adjacent or at a kind of angle, moving away from directly the topic of God, but then it's a kind of sort of larger category, the spiritual or the supernatural. Now remember, when we were talking about Hume, right, for something to count as a genuine miracle for Hume, it has to be supernatural, something that couldn't happen naturally. It has to be supernatural, above nature, or violates the laws of nature, right? So if you recall, I said that when we did that, that miracle is not only a supernatural experience or event, but it has to be a positive one, right? If some horrible supernatural event happened, we wouldn't call it a miracle, right? It might be like demonic possession or poltergeist or something like that, right? But we don't even have a word, one word that captures supernatural negative experience. We have supernatural positive experience. They all count as miracles in some sense, right? But we don't have a word for the negative ones, right? But if supernatural positive experiences are supposed to count as evidence for God, what do supernatural negative experiences count as evidence for? Right? I don't know. So I want to just treat this abstractly, include the arguments and the reasoning from all the philosophers who argue for and against God, William James, who argues about a willingness to experience the supernatural or God, right? Yogananda's had a particular experience of something supernatural he could see without his eyes, right? And some of my experiences like that. The larger category, which includes God and other things, is supernatural or spiritual, right? So that's how mine fits in. It opens up the topic a little more, and many of you who don't necessarily believe in God might still believe in spiritual or supernatural. So this opens it up, makes it a little more inclusive, right? And then tomorrow, just as a heads up, Radhakrishnan, he's a former president of India. He's an Indian philosopher. He's going to talk about what the title is actually, the personal experience of God. What's going on with those candies, or whatever it is, beads? I hear all kinds of noise and activity over there. Yeah, and you're dropping them, and people around you are laughing. There's some kind of comedy act going on over there. All right. Let's try to keep focused here, folks. So Radhakrishnan, you will find out when you read the article, I'll just give you a snippet view of it. He thinks that there is one common experience that people like Yogananda and others have, particularly Radhakrishnan has the positive thing in mind, right? The prophets who founded every religion, or mystics, or, other spiritual leaders, holy men, whatever, he thinks all of those people who've had an experience of the divine or the sacred or something like the higher power or whatever, it's all the same, right? And his argument is that that experience is of oneness. There's no separation between the individual and the experience, which feels like something like the way Yogananda described, the whole of the universe and the self become one, right? So he thinks that that transcends the mind that uses language. And when you come back into an ordinary state of mind, all you have as the equipment to try to express it is language. And language is already embedded in a culture with a history of meanings. So Jews interpret it one way, Hindus interpret it another way, Buddhists interpret it another way, even though they don't believe in God. They use the same kind of language to describe it. So he thinks it's all the same. And anyone can have that experience. Right? That's what's going on tomorrow. But I'm like a kind of foil, A foil, like, what does that mean? Like someone who ruins things, right? For all these guys put together, because you might not have read that far, I have 2 chapters. My first chapter is all the positive supernatural experiences that I had, and then the second chapter is of the negative ones, right? So I don't know about everything being one, or about this all being evidence for God. Right? It depends, I suppose, on what kind of experience you have. And if Radhakrishnan is right, I should have had you read Radhakrishnan first, that whatever those experiences are that people have, they seem to be colored by the belief systems that they already have. So, like St. Teresa, when she had her mystical communion experience, comes out of it and says something like, I experienced the Trinity, which is a Catholic concept, right? And Radhakrishnan says, a Muslim is not going to experience the Trinity when he has a transformative experience like that, right? Neither is a Buddhist. A Buddhist never experiences God. They don't believe in God, but they experience something that seems like the one. So that's a little synopsis of where we've been and where we're going, and then that'll be the end of our discussion of God, and then next week we switch over to free will. All right, so we talked about some of my experiences yesterday, and I just want to continue that discussion today.
Cool.
Yeah.
My question, what was it? Is there any philosopher that basically touches the subject dreams? Like, anyone's take on it?
Well, Carl Jung is a philosopher slash psychologist, and so William James also. William James believed in the supernatural and the paranormal. I told you he was a parapsychologist, a paranormal researcher. But Jung, in particular, thought that there is a thing called the collective unconscious. And this is similar in some way to what Yogananda thinks that he experienced. And what that means is it's a collective mind. That we are all connected to a kind of cosmic mind. Collective means we all partake in. But it's unconscious, meaning mind that we're not aware of. We're not normally aware of.
So that's supernatural.
Oh yeah, it's got to be. I mean,
So the question is we don't know whether it's good or bad.
no, that's one question. That's one question that I raised because of some of my own personal experiences. When people talk about these things, they tend to just sort of narrowly focus on one thing. That's just one of the problems that I'm raising. Who else? A colleague of mine in our department, Joseph Felser, he's very interested in this stuff. He's written a book called Back to Paradise, which is all about things like this. And so did another fellow named Michael Grosso, another philosopher who wrote a book called Soul Making. Not that many Western analytic philosophers, people who focus on arguments, right, and logic, go in for this sort of thing. Some do. Here's two of them. But this is a famous guy. He's a psychologist more than a philosopher, but certainly Carl Jung counts as a philosopher, who thinks that dreams tap into this and that we all have certain shared images that have meaning universally in our minds. He called them archetypes, right? It's that kind of universal forms and images and symbols that have meaning, the same meaning for all of us in all cultures, because we share in this same connection with this universal mind.
It's a book I kind of, it's not real book, it's a favorite. The Alchemist, it kind of talks a lot about this.
Yeah, The Alchemist is a novel, and I forget, hold on, Alchemist. Paulo Coelho, what's his name? Paulo, C-O-E?
I think it's H. I'm not sure, I don't know.
I forget his last name. The Alchemist. Yeah, this is a novel, but it's very kind of spiritual and deep, interesting book. It was a fun read. I don't know, what was your question again, Irma? About dreams? It was a very vague question.
Just like, how do I put this into words? Like, basically, I just wanted to know if, like, somebody has, like, defined it. Like, yeah, you dream this because this and this and this, and you know what I mean?
Yeah, the closest thing that comes to that is Carl Jung.
Not even scientifically?
No, I don't think there's a science of dream interpretation.
Or like a reason?
Carl Jung and another fellow, Joseph Campbell. Joseph Campbell did a lot of work about dreams and archetypes and universal images that and all kinds of meaning that they have. But like the kind of thing that you hear in what you might want to call folklore is that, oh, if you dream that your teeth fell out, that means this. You know, that kind of thing. I don't think that there's any kind of reliable enough knowledge to count as a kind of science of dream interpretation.
Right. And what do you call that? What's that word you just said? Folk what?
Folk psychology.
Oh yeah, like us, right? We make it up?
The folks.
Yeah.
Folk psychology or folklore. Actually, folk physics. We have all these terms that we use in philosophy to sort of identify categories of thinking. So folklore is like wives' tales and all that kind of stuff. This is the thing that the folks repeat to themselves.
Right.
They tell stories and
But
spread
this kind of-
superstitions and things like that.
Right, but-
There's certainly some wisdom in folklore, right? It's not law, L-A-W, it's lore, L-O-R-E, which means something like collection of stories. Folk psychology is a little more complicated than that, and this is something like the idea, but most human beings believe in what we would call folk psychology, and that's the idea that beliefs and desires determine actions. It's a kind of pop psychology outside the classroom, right? And it goes something, this like kind of triangle here. Let's just say that these are desires, and these are beliefs, and these are actions. These three parts are interdependent. So for instance, if you believe that your lover is in Paris, and you desire to see your lover, that would explain your action of going to Paris, right? And if you go to Paris, and you believe that your lover is there, it's because you wanted to see, right? Any two of these will help you infer the other one, right? It's a kind of very simplification, but neuroscientists think that this is false, right? Neuroscience lately thinks that the entire mental vocabulary, mental vocabulary of folk psychology is what you might want to call pseudoscience. It's not real. It's sort of like astronomy. That really neural states and all sorts of things going on an organismic level that we don't really have access to is what really explains the things that we call beliefs and desires and actions, right? And that we're really radically disconnected with what really controls our lives, right? And they don't think that we have free will either, right? So we'll talk about that next week. Folk physics is something like, sunrise, right? We have all these ideas like about weight and gravity that are not really scientifically informed, right? Or even like solidity. We think that the desk is solid, right? But really it's made up of more than 99% empty space. Like an atom, the part of the atom that has substance, and the next atom, like the electron rings are so wide apart that there's almost nothing but space. It's like less than 1% of matter in anything solid, and it's very permeable, but not to our hand, or other big objects can't go through it, right? So we have these conceptions about solidity. That's an illusion, right? Gravity, we don't have a real understanding of gravity. Our understanding of gravity and physicists' understanding of gravity are radically different. But like our understanding about the way it works, that's folk physics. Sunrise, for instance. We see the sun come up, we talk about the sunrise. This is a simple one. The sun doesn't move. The earth spins, right? And we're on the dark side, away from the sun, then we spin back and face the sun, right? So that's sunrise. It's really earth spin, right? But for the longest time, we thought that the sun revolved around the earth. It was called the earth-centered view, or the geocentric model, right? That turned out to be false. But many of us still hold the geocentric model in our ordinary consciousness, right? So that's all folk physics, right? So when it comes to like folk dream interpretation, there's all sorts of theories floating around that depend on what culture you're in, right? What dreams.
Even if you're not in any culture, I think it's just like you experience it.
Well, I don't know if like the interpretations are relative to different cultures. I don't think it's the same in every culture. When somebody says, "Oh, I dreamed that I couldn't find my classroom," Oh, that means that I was dreaming that I was naked in public. Oh, that means this. Or I dreamed that my teeth or my hair fell out. That means this. I dreamed that so-and-so died. Oh, that means that they're going to live long. You know, those what it means theories, they're not the same all over the world.
Right.
But some images are the same all over the world. And that's what Jung and Campbell call archetypes. Right? But it's an abstract theory, and I don't know how accurate that is. Right? And it's also dependent on the idea that we're all like cells in one mind. We're all communicating on some level. And Jung thought that, Carl Jung, this is pronounced like a Y, thought that the more spiritually evolved or connected we become, or advanced, connected, right, with this, then the more we have what he called synchronicities. Now, synchronicity might just mean like coincidence, because sin means same, and this means time. Chronos, chronological, things that happen at the same time. But he doesn't just mean what he calls meaningful coincidences. Scientists like Hume think that coincidences are never meaningful, right? They think it's just a coincidence. Coincidence, two things that are incidents that happen together, right? It's just luck of the draw. There are coincidences, right? Sometimes you're thinking about a number and you look down and it's on the license plate in front of you. Coincidence, right? But Jung thought that coincidences are meaningful and that the more spiritually advanced and connected you become with the one, the more that those things happen in your life, and that they're evidence for the fact that you're spiritually evolved. You talked about that, Abdullah, but from a slightly different interpretation. What's his name? The mystic, Al-Ghazali, he says that. Other people have said it in different contexts and different religions. So there might be something to it. I don't know.
So what was Carl Jung basically trying to argue with other?
This is just something that he thought was true.
I know. And besides that, like, was there something he was trying to, like, argue or prove to the world? You know what I'm trying to say, right?
Well, I would say that just like William James believed in the paranormal, the supernatural. He wasn't sure how to interpret it, so he was a researcher. He had a kind of open mind. He took a scientific attitude toward it. He used to try to test things and study them and everything. But so I think that Carl Jung believed in the same thing, that we seem to be separate beings with separate minds, but there's universal things that seem to happen in all cultures, and then the more that people seem to be connected with that, the more that these kinds of coincidences happen to them all the time. So he thought that that was evidence of something, right? This is his theory about what it is. That's it. That's his speculation, I think, and he thought that there was some evidence for it, but this is what psychologists and philosophers do, and scientists as well. They see, but scientists are a little more rigorous about it, a little more sharp and careful about it than philosophers and psychologists are usually. You know, you see a pattern, you think that it's indicative of something, and you speculate on it. You see evidence or data, you try to figure out what's the best theory that would explain that data, right? Just like, you know, I think I did this once before, you know, Florida, Mexico, South America, this is sloppy, but, you know, Canada, whatever. This is North America and South America, right? We don't care about this side, but it goes something like that. And then Africa. And you just look at this pattern and you see this on two different sides of the ocean, right? And this geologist, I forget his name, it should be famous, but a long time ago he said, gee, looks like they might have been attached.
Like Pangaea, the one that came over Pangaea?
Yeah, Pangaea, I don't know if that's exactly what that means. I forget what that means. It might be the same name. All one earth.
Yeah, it's one.
Yeah.
But a pan means all and Gaia means earth. There was one landmass. Maybe that's what it means. I don't know, but that's the same idea, whether or not that word applies to this theory. But he thought they were one, and then they drifted apart, and this is called continental drift, right? Which is part of what he suggested. His theory was called plate tectonics, which is that like the surface of the earth is like a cracked eggshell, right, on top of yolk, which is lava, right, and that it slides around, right, and that when the two sheets of eggshell, like surface layer earth, when they crash together, they form mountain ranges, right? And so he thought this was splitting apart this way, and right, and everybody laughed at him, right? They left him right out of the academy as if he was, insane. But he turned out to be right. All the evidence proved that he was right. Okay, that like at the time that they used to be joined, there was life forms in common, right? That you find at layers of the earth when that should have happened. And then after that, no more life forms in common, right? That's just one example of ways in which this could be shown to be true. But they have like 1,000 different ways of verifying these theories. So what is originally, you see a pattern, and you come up with a hypothesis. If it's evidence for it, well, the answer is, what's the best theory, right? The best theory is the one that explains all the data perfectly without any discrepancies, right? So when it comes to something like this, these kind of psychological and philosophical theories, they don't fit so neatly like this. It's hard to prove things like that, right? That's the problem. But that opens it up for a lot of possibilities. Some hands were up that I didn't get to. It was you, Nadia? Sure. Just kidding. David?
I was just gonna mention, what about that map that they found like in the 1000th century, whatever AD? I mean, 1000 AD, where they had the whole like world kind of mapped out completely.
I don't know about this. I don't know anything about it. So I plead ignorance. Socrates. We don't know.
Now I was gonna ask you, like, do you believe in Kemet? Did you ever hear of Kemet or Nubians? The Nubians?
Nubian is a term that is for a certain kind of Africans. I don't think there's any mystery about whether or not there were Nubians.
I'm saying the ancient Nubians. These are the Nubians we know about. I'm talking about ancient Nubians from Kemet. Kemet was what they called it, Pangea. Pangea, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that. I think that this happened way before there were humans, but my memory about geology is old because I took that class a long time ago when I was about your age.
What about the Anunnaki?
I don't know. Who were they? That's 3 things I don't know about. And a bat and 1,000.
Apparently, well, I don't really believe in this, but apparently there's another theory that goes that basically aliens came to visit us at a certain point in time, and like that's what the references are in the Bible or whatever. But it's supposed to be the Anunnaki, like they have like pictures of them in like Egypt or whatever, of like these people with like weird shaped heads and stuff. And basically they're said to like they biogenetically engineered us or something, like, and then like put their DNA into us or something, and that's why we became smart or something like that.
What are they called though?
Anunnaki.
Anunnaki? That's kind of like, is a theory I have, you know what I'm saying? It's a theory. I'm gonna just go about it because like, you see how
You and your theories.
Native Americans, you see how the Native Americans were conquered?
Yes.
Yes, I believe that's how the Africans or the people before the Dark Ages and way before that, you know what I'm saying, like, got taken over. Same way, hospitality, show them how to live, give them information, give them knowledge, and then they get you in the back, you know what I'm
Who's
saying?
they?
The
Aliens?
Anunnakis or whoever.
The
you know what I'm saying?
aliens?
I can't go, me, I'm still trying to figure that out myself, you know what I'm saying? But like, yeah, that's how the theory goes, the same way. Native American, you know, they came, showed people how to live, eat, you know what I'm saying? And boom, what happened? They start eating you, like.
I saw Twilight Zone when I was a kid.
Ha!
And Al, what's so fun?
Nah, look.
When you have a laugh that big in class, you're obligated to explain why, Al. You know? It's only fair.
Well, what happened? Nah, because you said Twilight Zone and like it sounded like a coincided with what.
Oh, you thought I was saying his ideas belong on the Twilight Zone?
Yeah.
No,
I mean,
actually, what he said reminded me of a Twilight Zone episode that I saw when I was a kid. And these aliens came.
Oh, that one.
And they were very helpful, and they helped us grow all these crops, and they gave us all this technology to make, we were all so happy. And they came here like that. Their mission was to serve us, right? And they had a book, and they said it means to serve man. And they taught us all this technology, and we had all this food, and everybody was getting healthy. Nobody was starving anymore. And then they were going to bring some of us up to their planet, and thousands of us were getting on the spaceship. And then like the guys from the CIA who were trying to decode the book, code breakers, they come rushing in at the last minute saying, "It's a cookbook! It's a cookbook!"
To serve man.
To cook. They would fatten us up. They were going to eat us. Right? It was very funny. And scary. It reminded me of that. So, I don't know if this is true, but this religion that John Travolta, and what's that other guy?
Oh, Scientology.
Yeah.
The Lord Xenon or
And
something.
Tom Cruise, John Travolta, these people who are otherwise quite successful and respectful and intelligent seem to believe this, and I don't know enough about it, so I hate to disparage a belief system that I don't really know enough about.
Can I give a background?
But wait a minute, let me just say this. I know that they believe something like that, to my knowledge.
No, they believe something.
Something worse than that.
Even crazier. They believe.
I know.
That
Go ahead. Then you do it, and I'm not responsible
This
for it.
internet.
Tell me about Scientology, David.
This interdimensional being, right? Lord Zeno. Basically, all of us are okay. There's this bunch of aliens, right? And then they had this intergalactic war or whatever. And Earth is the last place that they could go. They all died, and then their souls of these aliens, all remnants throughout the Earth, and like they just envelop our bodies as we're born or whatever, and we're all like pretty much the souls of aliens. After this great massive war.
That's one thing that I've heard about them. I've heard other equally bizarre accounts of what they mean from students, and all the accounts don't add up. One of them is that there's these intergalactic wars, and they've been here before, and they did seed mankind, and they're responsible for evolution on Earth and why humans are so much smarter than monkeys. But they made us this way so that we'd be intelligent slaves. We were originally slaves, and so it's really complicated. But I don't know anything else about it, and it's a kind of religion that it's secretive. You join it and you move up in the ranks and you find out more and that kind of thing. And that woman who recently divorced, it seemed really scary, like a cult, I don't know. But all I have to say is when things start going in that direction and we start entertaining all these bizarro theories, here's what I have to say. A, never dismiss anything just because it seems insane. That's what Plato said, right? Because the person coming back into the cave seems like a nut to the people in the cave, but he's seen the light, right? So what seems like it's insane might actually be true, and we're the ignorant ones. That's number one. On the other hand, all these theories are like maybe hypotheses, right? Like maybe we're brains in vats. Maybe the world is 5 minutes old. Maybe aliens, came here or they're still here or whatever. They're all maybe theories. So the job of critical philosophical thinking is to look at all the data and look at all the different possible explanations of it and not accept a theory just because it's cool and interesting or frightening or it satisfies some need of yours, right? But because you have the best evidence for it, right? And if you don't have enough evidence, as Descartes said, 2 + 2 is 4, 2 + 3 is not 4, there's a sentence that you don't know, then don't accept it, don't reject it, just consider it, and hold off on your judgment, right? That's being open-minded. So that's the philosophical attitude. I'll say one thing, however, about all these bizarro things and pyramids and whatnot. This thought came out. There was a book called Chariots of the Gods by a fellow named Van Doniken. Came out in the 70s, early 70s or late 60s. And he had this theory, and many have supported, sort of added their 2 cents to it all along, that almost every religion and myth on Earth has stories of miraculous things happening. Most of them involve sky gods. gods that come down out of the sky with beams of light that lift people up and things like that. And if you look at all these stories, right, it's like the gremlins or the squirrels. Which is the better hypothesis, right? All those people were either mistaken or just this one group, our ancestors was right and everybody else is wrong. Or maybe aliens really did visit the earth in the past. And all those stories about levitation and this and that involve tractor beams and like super advanced technology from beings who visited the earth at some time. And just like the Europeans acted like gods to the Indians who didn't know about guns with little bullets and swords, and all they had was bow and arrows, and they never saw white skin, and the Europeans took advantage of them, right? Maybe that's what happened. Ignorant mankind was taken advantage of by super beings with great technology from another place who are just a step ahead of us in terms of time. Give humankind another 1,000 years and we'll have all that technology too, right? So Plato writes a story, he calls it the myth of air, right? He says he didn't make up the story, it was known in his day. He just recorded, and he makes a reference to it to make another point, right? He says, everyone back in his day knew the myth of air, and it goes like this. A farmer or a pastor, a shepherd, whatever, was out in the field and saw a big hole in the ground. And there was a big metal horse broken open in the ground. And he went in and found a huge man in there lying dead. And he had a ring on his finger, and he took the ring off and put it on his own finger, right? Later in the day, he was just playing with the ring, and he realized that when he turned it a certain way, he became invisible. So he took that ring, and he used it to sneak into a castle and seduced the queen and killed the king and took over the kingdom. This is the story, right? But what does that sound like? Plato brought it up to say, if you had an invisibility ring and you could get away with anything, would you still have reason to be good? That's the reason Plato brought up the story, right? He wasn't trying to convince anybody about aliens. He doesn't mention aliens. But it sounds to me like a spaceship and some kind of stealth technology. You turn it on, your atoms start to vibrate a certain way, and there's nothing but space here, most of it, and you look invisible, right? It doesn't seem irrational to me. And all the stories from every different religion have these things that one hypothesis could explain all those things. And that's the X-Files theory, right? Anybody ever watch X-Files? So all those supernatural things, all possibly explained by one thing. Aliens. Now, I might sound like a lunatic, but I'm not saying that it's true, but it's something to consider. I'm not one of those people who thinks, oh yeah, there's conspiracy, the government knows about it, Area 51, all that. I don't know. I really don't know. I don't know. Did you want to say something?
Yeah, I was gonna say, regarding the whole they see like a god coming or whatever, and like you were saying that the Native Americans weren't really
With the Europeans.
with the Europeans.
Right.
It's like Montezuma right there.
Right.
When he came over, they thought that Cortez was a god.
Yeah, and they took advantage of that.
Yeah.
And they acted like that.
They gave
and
him golden.
Right. But yeah, the paintings in the pyramids, not only in Egypt, but in South America and Latin America, they have pyramids and in China, 3 different parts of the world, all around the same time, that kind of technology that human beings, we don't even know how they could have had it, but the pictures in all of them show what looks like human-like beings with all kinds of space gear, right? And there's
Pictures like that? Like
Yeah.
real pictures?
the paintings in the
Carlos.
paintings in the pyramids, the hieroglyphic art and all that, and like the Egyptian gods of human bodies and animal heads and all this kind of stuff.
The animal heads was to represent the animal condition of them.
I understand that, but I'm just saying there's also pictures in there that look like aliens, right? And not only in Egypt, but in South America and in Machu Picchu in Peru, right? You can only see from the sky what look like huge
The Nazca
strips.
lines.
Yeah, they look like landing fields, but like you could land a plane there, carved into nature, right? Trees all cleared and everything, but they form pictures that are the same kind of pictures that are in the pyramids over there, right? That are like beautiful, big designs, right? That you can only see from the sky. And they're not like crop circles that somebody might have done as a gag 5 years ago. They've been there for over 1,000 years. Archaeologists can prove that. So why did they do that? Why did they do things that can only be seen from the sky? Right, makes you think. So, Men in Black. Did you ever see Men in Black? I wonder how many aliens are in this class right now. Come on, open up. Wouldn't you freak out if somebody just turned into an alien right now?
Get stabbed by a pen.
Stab him with your pen. Well, we have about 5 minutes left. So, look, I wanted this to be a casual conversation about this. And that's why I allowed all these other things to come in. But, you know, some of you have had weird experiences. And what do you think about the basic question on the board for today is, should we listen to people like Hume or should we listen to people like James about stuff like this?
James.
Yeah, I think James.
Gotta be open-minded. Can't be closed like, yeah, it's explainable. You feel me? Everything is explainable. No. I don't do that.
Was that you? Who spoke over here?
I said James.
James?
Yeah.
Why?
Because people, like, we dream, right? Sometimes, I mean, we see stuff, obviously. Like, I dream, and most times as it comes to pass, like, it happens. So I don't think we should be closed-minded, like, yeah,
How many of you have had dreams like that? Maybe not as complicated as mine. 10 lottery tickets in a row.
Yeah,
Do you think that they're real and they're meaningful?
I think so.
Sometimes. Irma?
Unexplainable because I'm closed-minded. I don't mean it in the sense that I'm judgmental to others. I just superstition and all that. I hear it, but I don't apply it.
Has it happened to you?
Yeah,
And you still and you don't know what to think about it.
I ignore it, but I know it's happened to me. You know, with the whole teeth that you said, and when I dream
Or
it,
dreams of teeth falling out?
yes, and the person dies, and
Yeah.
it's like it's all the time. I'm in the nursing field, so I deal with residents, and every time I dream of mouth, that person dies, and it's like, alright, I didn't dream it. I'm not even gonna tell nobody. Or the fact that I keep dreaming of a certain person my whole life, and
A guy, I forget his name, famous guy, wrote a book called Blink. Anybody ever read that book? No. It's about how, like an expert, somebody who works really closely with something, has multiple levels of intuition and knowledge. Like a cop over the years can tell if somebody's dirty, like that they're carrying something, right? They can just sort of read it in their eyes or something like that. You get to learn to read people. So in Blink, it was an art curator, and he realized that a statue that this Vegas museum was going to spend millions of dollars for was a fake. But they did all the tests on it, and it passed all the tests. The person who made it knew about the tests and set it up so that it would pass the test. But this guy, he couldn't say why, but he knew that it was a fake, and he was right. It's called like a kind of gut sense or an intuition. But that's built on, like, you know when, if you're driving and somebody cuts you off, you want to get a look at their face? Right? It's because some part of you is making generalizations about how people behave and how they look when they behave. Like, what do liars look like? What do phonies look like? What do, you know, we're constantly absorbing information. So maybe because you work with people who are sick all the time, you've developed an ability to sense when they're going to die, and then you have the dream. That's what Hume would say.
and I would be more satisfied.
So
with
squirrel
that.
theory or gremlins in the attic, that's the squirrel theory here, right? So like, yeah, that's the squirrel kind of theory, because it could possibly be explained by your nursing skills that are better than you even realize.
Right. So what would you, I don't mean to like,
No, please, do take the floor,
I
because we
keep
don't hear
dreaming
enough
of
from
this
you.
person since I can remember, since I met him. And this was back in grade school. I've been married, I have my kids, and I've been in love, but this guy is literally like a splinter in my brain. I cannot stop dreaming about him. Like, and I don't even like think about it, and when I see him, I like literally like blush, and I don't even talk to him, you know? And it's crazy.
you
Does your
know?
husband know about it?
Yeah.
Good,
Yes.
because you're on film and it's public.
I've told people because you know how they say, well, you know, let it out or write it down, maybe it'll stop.
Yeah.
No, this shit still happens.
That's interesting.
It's crazy.
Did you have a crush on him when you were a kid?
But I was like in grade school, I was like literally in kindergarten. And I don't see him. I see him maybe like when we like Brighton is like where I grew up, so he still lives there. So whenever like I bump into him, but I'm talking about I haven't been to Brighton in like 5 years. In those 5 years, I've still been dreaming about him. And it's like you can't tell me that because I had a crush on him back when I was like a baby. I've experienced love. It's nothing compared to a crush. Why can't I dream more about my husband than this dude that I have? He's a stranger to me.
I'm going to be a little sarcastic. It sounds like a personal problem between you and your husband. Now, all kidding aside, I don't
No,
know.
seriously, I think so too. I'm like, am I going nuts? Like, what is that? Is it my subconscious? Like, I don't know. Like I said, I like to just not think about it. It happens, you know?
Yeah, I don't know. Well, look, it's interesting and intriguing, but that's not like a supernatural kind of thing, unless you think that there's some kind of soulmate connection there or something. I don't know how to go there. Maria, and then
So she mentioned about how she, you just mentioned how people can tell when a person's gonna die based on their experience. But what about a person that has a feeling that they're gonna die, but has never seen, I don't know how to think.
Not working that field, right?
Yeah,
yeah,
because my mom, she's kind of sick and she has dealt with a lot of people that have gone through life and have passed away. And before they pass away, sometimes they start giving out things or start behaving nicer. And like a couple of weeks later, they.
Well,
Right,
supposedly people that are about to die know when they're going to die.
sometimes that happens. There seems to be some kind
Our
of
grandparents
consensus that sometimes people sense when they're going to die, right? Just like animals can sense the weather. You know, if your heart is weak and it's going to give out soon, it's in your body, it's connected with your nervous system, which is connected with your brain, and you don't have to go in for a collective unconscious, you've got your own unconscious. Your body might sense that it's about to fall apart.
Who are the people that sick?
Yeah. Right, like, and then you get like you hit by a bus or something like that, right? That's how you die. Right. Well, then that would be some kind of meaningful coincidence. That Young would think that that counts as evidence for something. The question, we're going to do this tomorrow, one more class on this subject, but the question to leave with today is, all this stuff, it's evidence of something, but what is it evidence of? Is it evidence of aliens, evidence of God, evidence of the supernatural, evidence that our minds are more powerful than...
It's evidence that we don't really know what
That's
we
what the
should know.
Native Americans called all this stuff the great mystery.
Yeah.
Like they know there's something, they don't know what it is.
Because it's
That's a
always-
Socratic attitude.
Yeah.
All right, we're out of time.
All right.
See you tomorrow.
You all gotta give it down the back, you know, your mom.
Try to put it up there. So that all the grades are in there. That's what I want to go by. All right, what's up now, man? All right, there's no rush.
So you love me now? Let me see love now.
I don't know about it, but whatever. Yeah, I'm fine with that. Be careful. Bring some garlic with you.
I'm gonna bring it, alright? Believe me on that one. And then, pretty much it.
So are we recording?
Yes.
Really? On YouTube?
I don't know where it's going to wind up.